Fired again, 3 jobs gone in 5 years. But this time, I took what they could never get back. Hi, my name is Chris Willock and I'm 34 years old. Before I tell you how I destroyed the company that nearly killed me and how I walked away with 7 figures, go ahead and hit that subscribe button below. If you love stories where hard work meets perfect revenge, where the underdog doesn't just win but completely annihilates those who wronged them, this is exactly what you're looking for. What happened to me could happen to anyone who thinks loyalty and skill will protect them in corporate America. Now let me tell you how losing everything became the most profitable mistake my enemies ever made. I've been fired 3 times in 5 years. As a father of 3 beautiful kids, my wife stays home with them, and I'm halfway through my doctorate in artificial intelligence. Each firing hit harder than the last. Each time, I thought I'd learned my lesson about corporate loyalty. Each time, I was wrong. But the 3rd time, that one nearly killed me. Literally. I was lying in a hospital bed, for in my arm, when I realized something that would change everything. While they were demanding I work through my medical emergency, while they were threatening my job because I dared to prioritize my health over their deadline, I remembered the one thing I'd built that they could never take away. My AI framework. The system I'd developed in my spare time, licensed to them under very specific terms. They thought they owned me. They had no idea I owned the very foundation their biggest projects were built on. And I was about to make them pay for every sleepless night, every missed dinner with my kids, every moment they treated me like I was disposable. The first fall happened 4 years ago. I'd given everything to a tech startup, 4 years of my life, working weekends, believing in the vision. I was young, ambitious, and naive enough to think that dedication mattered. Then COVID hit. Our CEO, Jackson Palmer, transformed overnight from inspirational leader to paranoid dictator. Budget cuts became personal attacks. Team meetings turned into screaming matches. The office culture I'd helped build crumbled under his fear and incompetence. I watched talented colleagues quit one by one, each departure making Jackson more unstable. He started blaming everyone except himself for the company's problems. Innovation died. Creativity became a liability. When he finally fired me, citing budget constraints, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. 4 years of loyalty, gone with a 15-minute termination meeting. I cleaned out my desk, said goodbye to the few remaining teammates, and walked out thinking I'd learned a valuable lesson about startup volatility. What I didn't know was that Jackson's company would file for bankruptcy 3 months later. Every employee I'd cared about would lose their jobs anyway. Sometimes karma works faster than you expect. 6 months of unemployment followed. 6 months of sending out applications into the digital void, getting 0 callbacks, watching our savings disappear. My wife Emma tried to stay positive, but I could see the worry in her eyes when bills arrived. Our kids kept asking why I was always home, why I looked so sad. Christmas was coming, and I had no idea how we'd afford presents. The rejection emails were the worst part. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Your qualifications don't quite match our current needs. We'll keep your resume on file for future opportunities. Translation: you're not wanted anywhere. I started doubting everything about myself. My skills, my experience, my worth as a professional and provider. Depression crept in like fog, making every day feel hopeless. Emma suggested I take breaks from job hunting, but I couldn't stop. Every day without work was another day closer to losing our house, disappointing our children, admitting that I'd failed as a father and husband. Then, on a Tuesday morning that started like every other crushing day of rejection, one email changed everything. The subject line read: Director of Technology position, immediate start available. Blackstone Technologies offered me everything I'd dreamed of. Director of Technology. Six-figure salary. Real equity. An office with windows. Finally, recognition for my skills and experience. The interview process was smooth, professional, respectful. The team seemed talented and collaborative. The company was growing fast, landing major contracts, positioning itself as an industry leader. I started on a Monday morning feeling like I'd finally found my place in the world. The office was modern and open, with standing desks and collaborative spaces. My team was brilliant, developers who actually cared about code quality, project managers who understood realistic timelines, designers who pushed creative boundaries. For 6 months, everything was perfect. We shipped products on time and under budget. Clients praised our work. Revenue grew steadily. I felt like I'd finally escaped the curse of bad companies and toxic leadership. I was building something meaningful, leading a team that respected my vision, contributing to real business success. Emma noticed the change immediately. I came home energized instead of drained. I played with the kids instead of collapsing on the couch. Life felt balanced again. But office politics are like cancer, they grow silently until they're everywhere. The poison started slowly. Whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Sudden changes to project timelines without consultation. Key decisions made in meetings I wasn't invited to attend. I tried to ignore the signs, focusing on my work and my team's success. But corporate politics don't care about your performance metrics or client satisfaction scores. The company was expanding rapidly, bringing in new executives with their own agendas. Old relationships that had protected me were diluted by fresh blood that saw me as competition rather than collaboration. Vincent Hayes, the new VP of Operations, made no secret of his ambitions. He wanted control over technology decisions, despite having zero technical background. His MBA from an expensive program apparently qualified him to second-guess engineers who'd been coding since he was in high school. Alliances formed around me like storm clouds. People I'd considered friends started distancing themselves, afraid to be associated with someone who might fall from grace. The final blow came from someone I'd trusted completely, my own mentor, the person who'd hired me and promised to protect my position. He called me into his office on a Friday afternoon and delivered the news that would shatter my world again. "Chris, we need you to help onboard a new hire," my mentor said, avoiding eye contact. "Someone with fresh perspectives who can bring innovative approaches to our technology stack." The new hire was Derek Thompson, younger, cheaper, and eager to prove himself by implementing every trendy framework he'd read about on tech blogs. For 2 weeks, I trained my replacement without knowing it. I showed Derek our code base, explained our architecture decisions, introduced him to clients and stakeholders. I gave him access to everything. Documentation, passwords, relationship contacts that I built over months of careful work. He asked thoughtful questions, took detailed notes, and thanked me repeatedly for my guidance and mentorship. The entire time, management was evaluating whether Derek could handle my responsibilities for half my salary. On a Wednesday morning, HR called me into their conference room. Vincent Hayes sat across from me with a practiced expression of corporate sympathy. "We're restructuring the technology department," he said. "Your position is being eliminated." Derek was promoted to director that same afternoon. I packed my personal items while watching my replacement settle into my office, already planning changes to systems I'd carefully built and optimized. When I left that evening, Derek shook my hand and wished me luck finding something new. 8 months in the unemployment desert nearly broke me completely. This time was worse than before. 2 consecutive firings made me radioactive to potential employers. Every interview ended with uncomfortable questions about why I'd been let go twice in 3 years. Our savings vanished. Credit cards maxed out. Emma took a part-time job at a grocery store just to buy groceries, leaving our kids with babysitters we couldn't afford. The house went into foreclosure proceedings. We sold everything valuable, my car, Emma's jewelry, furniture that had belonged to her grandmother. Each item felt like another piece of our life disappearing. Our kids started asking why we couldn't afford pizza anymore, why their friends had newer toys, why Daddy was always sad and angry. Emma's voice grew sharper with each passing month. Not angry at me, exactly, but frustrated with our situation, scared about our future, exhausted from carrying emotional and financial burdens that were crushing both of us. I applied to hundreds of jobs. Senior positions, junior roles, anything that might pay our bills. The market had shifted. Companies wanted younger, cheaper talent or established leaders with unbroken success records. Then, when our situation felt completely hopeless, I received an offer that seemed too good to be true. And in hindsight, it was. Data Flow Solutions offered me a contract position that would pay more money than I'd ever made in my life. The hourly rate was astronomical. Enough to catch up on our mortgage, pay off our debt, and restore our family's financial stability in just a few months. The catch? It was a short-term engagement with intense deliverables and aggressive timelines. I should have recognized the red flags immediately. Companies don't pay premium rates unless they're desperate or the work is unsustainable. But when you're drowning, you grab any rope thrown your way. The project was complex. Rebuilding their entire customer data pipeline from scratch in 4 months. The previous contractor had quit without warning, leaving behind broken code and angry stakeholders. During the interview, the project manager mentioned that I'd need to be flexible with hours and committed to success. I nodded eagerly, thinking about our overdue bills and my children's disappointed faces. My first day started at 7 in the morning with a conference call featuring 12 different stakeholders, each with contradictory requirements and unrealistic expectations. By noon, I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. But the money was too good to walk away from, and our financial situation was too desperate to be picky. I convinced myself it was temporary, just a few months of intensity to get back on solid ground. 18-hour days became my new normal. I worked every weekend, every holiday, every moment I wasn't sleeping or eating. Emma would bring me dinner at my desk, kiss my forehead, and tell the kids that Daddy was working hard to fix our problems. But I could see the frustration in her eyes, the loneliness in our children's faces. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. 4 hours a night, sometimes less, fueled by coffee and desperation. My body started breaking down in ways I'd never experienced. Headaches that lasted for days. Muscle tension that made my shoulders feel like concrete blocks. Digestive problems from stress and irregular eating. But the project was making progress, stakeholders were finally happy, and my bank account was growing for the first time in months. I told myself I could survive anything for a few more weeks. The immune system doesn't care about financial necessity or professional deadlines. When your body decides it's had enough abuse, it shuts down whether you can afford it or not. The infection started as a minor cold but escalated rapidly into something dangerous. Within days, I was running a fever of 103 degrees, unable to keep food down, barely conscious enough to recognize my family's faces. Emma drove me to the emergency room while I drifted in and out of consciousness in the passenger seat. The hospital room was stark white and smelled like disinfectant and fear. Machines beeped steadily while 4 fluids dripped into my arm, replacing nutrients my body had burned through during months of self-destruction. Your immune system collapsed from chronic stress and exhaustion, the doctor explained to Emma while I drifted between sleep and consciousness. His body simply shut down from overwork. Emergency surgery was scheduled to drain an infection that had spread through my chest cavity. The surgeon explained that another few days without treatment could have been fatal. While I lay there, barely able to lift my head, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from Dataflow. Where are you? Client meeting in an hour. Project deadline is tomorrow. Need status update immediately. Your absence is unacceptable. Call me. Emma answered one call and told my project manager I was in the hospital having emergency surgery. His response: can he work remotely from his hospital bed? That moment crystallized everything wrong with the relationship between worker and employer. I was literally fighting for my life, and they were worried about their timeline. But lying in that hospital bed, fighting off an infection that nearly killed me, I remembered something I'd been too stressed and desperate to think about clearly. The AI framework. My secret weapon. 2 weeks later, against my doctor's advice and Emma's protests, I returned to work. The bills wouldn't stop coming just because I needed recovery time, and Dataflow had made it clear that my position wasn't guaranteed if I couldn't meet their demands. But I'd learned something important during my medical crisis. My health was worth more than any paycheck, my family was worth more than any project deadline. I established a firm boundary: 50 hours per week, maximum. No exceptions. The project manager laughed when I told him. Chris, you're a contractor, not an employee. You work the hours we need, or we find someone who will. I looked at him calmly and said, then you'll need to find someone else. I won't sacrifice my health again for any job. His expression shifted from amusement to anger to panic as he realized I was serious. You can't just change the terms of our agreement, he said. I'm not changing terms, I replied. I'm establishing boundaries that should have existed from the beginning. He threatened to terminate my contract immediately. I told him to go ahead, I'd rather be unemployed than dead. But deep down, I knew they couldn't afford to lose me. Not with everything I'd built for them, not with the knowledge I possessed about their systems. What they didn't know was that I held a card they couldn't even see yet. The ultimatum came 2 weeks later. Budget cuts were forcing immediate salary reductions across all contractor positions. My team would have their pay slashed by 30%, effective immediately. It's temporary, the project manager assured me. Just until we secure additional funding. I looked at the good people on my team, talented developers with families, mortgages, responsibilities. They couldn't afford to lose 30% of their income. I won't implement pay cuts for my team, I said firmly. Then you're refusing a direct order from management. I'm protecting the people who've worked tirelessly on your project. His face turned red with frustration. Chris, you need to understand your position here. You're replaceable. Everyone is replaceable. That's when I remembered the conversation I'd had with their legal team 6 months earlier, when I disclosed my AI framework and licensed it for their use. The proprietary system I developed during my unemployment, refined during my doctoral studies, and licensed to Dataflow under very specific terms. They'd been using it in every major project, including the one that had nearly killed me. And they'd completely forgotten that I owned it. The smile that crossed my face must have looked strange, because the project manager suddenly seemed less confident about his threats. 6 months earlier, when Dataflow hired me, I'd been completely transparent about my intellectual property. I'd developed an advanced AI framework during my unemployment period, a system that could analyze and optimize data processing workflows with unprecedented efficiency. During the legal review process, I'd licensed this technology to Dataflow under specific terms. They could use it for operational purposes, but I retained full ownership and could revoke access at any time. Their legal team had been more interested in protecting their own intellectual property than understanding what I was bringing to the table. They'd rushed through the paperwork, focusing on ensuring I couldn't claim ownership of anything I developed for them. They'd completely overlooked the fact that I already owned something they desperately needed. My AI framework had become the backbone of their data processing pipeline. Every major client project relied on its optimization algorithms. Without it, their systems would revert to manual processes that took 10 times longer and produced inferior results. I'd built their competitive advantage, and they'd forgotten I could take it away. Standing in that conference room, listening to threats about my replaceable status, I felt a calm certainty settle over me. They were about to learn exactly how replaceable I really was. And how irreplaceable my technology had become to their business. I resigned the next morning with a simple email, effective immediately. I'm terminating my contract with Dataflow Solutions. Thank you for the opportunity. No drama, no angry speech, no burning bridges. Just a professional notice that I was done. The project manager called within minutes, his voice suddenly friendly and concerned. Chris, let's talk about this. Maybe we can work something out. There's nothing to work out, I replied calmly. I've made my decision. But the project. You're in the middle of critical deliverables. You'll figure it out. Everyone's replaceable, remember? I could hear the panic creeping into his voice, but I kept my tone professional and final. Emma found me in my home office that afternoon, organizing files and updating my resume. She looked worried. Losing this contract meant losing our financial lifeline. Are you sure about this? She asked gently. I smiled and pulled up my licensing agreement with Dataflow. Trust me. In 72 hours, they're going to be calling us with a very different conversation. She read the document, her eyes widening as she understood the implications. You own the system they're using for everything. Every algorithm, every optimization, every competitive advantage they think they have. The next step was simple, revoke their license and watch their world collapse. Monday morning, I sent a formal notice to Dataflow's legal department. Effective immediately, all licensing rights to the Willock AI framework are revoked. Any continued use constitutes intellectual property violation and will result in legal action. I copied their CEO, their project managers, and their biggest client contacts. Then I sat back and waited. The first call came within an hour. Their head of legal, suddenly very interested in discussing the terms of my original licensing agreement. Chris, this seems like a misunderstanding. Can we schedule a meeting to clarify the situation? No misunderstanding, I replied. I'm revoking access to my proprietary technology. Your team has 48 hours to remove all instances of my framework from your systems. But that would shut down our entire data processing pipeline. That's correct. By noon, their biggest client had called an emergency meeting. Without my AI framework, the project I'd been working on would fail completely. Months of work would be worthless, deliverables would be impossible to meet, and penalty clauses would trigger massive financial consequences. My phone rang constantly throughout the day, project managers, executives, even the CEO himself, all suddenly very interested in having productive conversations about our mutual interests. I let every call go to voicemail. Each message sounded more desperate than the last. By Tuesday morning, they understood exactly how replaceable I really was. Without my AI framework, Dataflow's projects collapsed like dominoes. Their main client project, which had been running smoothly with my technology, suddenly required 10 times the processing power and produced results so inferior that quality standards couldn't be met. Automated systems that had been optimizing workflows in real time reverted to manual processes that took days instead of hours. Data analysis that had been providing accurate predictions became unreliable guesswork that endangered client relationships. By Wednesday, their biggest client threatened to terminate their contract and demand penalty payments for missed deliverables. Other clients started asking uncomfortable questions about why their projects were suddenly experiencing technical difficulties. The domino effect was beautiful to watch from the outside. Internal emails leaked by sympathetic former colleagues revealed the panic spreading through management. Emergency board meetings were called. Consultants were hired to assess the damage. Lawyers were researching intellectual property law to find loopholes that didn't exist. Thursday morning, their CEO called personally. His voice was different, respectful, almost humble. Gone was the corporate arrogance that had defined every previous interaction. "Chris, I think we need to have a conversation about resolving this situation in a way that benefits everyone involved." I named my meeting time and location. Not their office, a neutral conference room where I held all the power. The tables had completely turned. The CEO arrived 15 minutes early to our meeting, accompanied by their head of legal and the project manager who'd called me replaceable just days before. Their body language told the story. Shoulders slumped, nervous energy, defeated expressions. These were people who'd realized they'd made a catastrophic mistake. "Chris," the CEO began, "we clearly undervalued your contributions to our projects. We'd like to discuss terms for reinstating your licensing agreement." I let the silence stretch uncomfortably long before responding. "What kind of terms are you thinking about?" They offered to reinstate my contract at a higher hourly rate, with guaranteed minimum hours and better working conditions. I shook my head. "I'm not interested in working for Dataflow again." Their legal counsel leaned forward. "Then what would it take to restore our licensing agreement?" This was the moment I'd been planning since I'd left the hospital, the conversation that would determine whether my family's financial future was secure or uncertain. Full licensing fees for the past 6 months of usage, plus damages for unauthorized continued use after revocation, plus ongoing royalty payments for future use. The numbers I presented made them visibly uncomfortable. "That's significant," the CEO said carefully. "Less significant than the penalties you'll pay if your clients terminate their contracts," I replied. But I wasn't done yet. The negotiation lasted 3 hours, but I held every advantage. They needed my technology immediately to prevent complete business collapse. I had no urgent need to accommodate them. They offered a lump sum payment to resolve everything quickly and quietly. I refused. I wanted ongoing recognition of my intellectual property value, not a one-time payout that would let them forget this lesson. "We need licensing terms that reflect the true value of what I've created," I said firmly. "This technology is worth millions to your business operations." Their legal counsel tried various approaches, claiming their modifications had created derivative works they could use independently, arguing that my original licensing agreement was too broad, suggesting that my revocation was legally questionable. Each argument fell apart under scrutiny. My documentation was meticulous, my legal standing was unshakable, and their desperation was obvious. Finally, the CEO asked the question I'd been waiting for: "What exactly do you want, Chris?" I presented my terms: full retroactive licensing fees for 6 months of usage, penalty payments for continued use after revocation, ongoing royalty payments for future use, and formal acknowledgement of my intellectual property ownership. The total amount was 7 figures. They tried to negotiate lower numbers, but I held firm. My technology had generated millions in revenue for their business. My compensation should reflect that value. "We need time to consider this," the CEO said. "You have 24 hours, I replied. "After that, I'm licensing my technology to your competitors." The leverage play was simple but devastating. I'd already been contacted by 3 of Dataflow's competitors who'd heard about their technical difficulties and were interested in acquiring superior data processing capabilities. One company offered to license my AI framework exclusively, guaranteeing that data flow would never regain access to the technology that had become essential to their operations. When I mentioned these conversations to Dataflow's CEO, the panic in his voice was unmistakable. "Chris, let's be reasonable here. We can work something out that benefits everyone." "I am being reasonable. I'm offering to maintain your licensing agreement at fair market rates. Your competitors are offering exclusive deals that would shut you out completely." The competitive pressure was real and immediate. Dataflow's rivals smelled blood in the water and were circling aggressively. Within hours, one competitor publicly announced they were developing revolutionary AI-powered data processing capabilities that would exceed current industry standards. Everyone in the industry understood the implications. Dataflow was losing their technological edge to the very person they'd mistreated. Their stock price dropped 12% in 2 days as investors recognized the vulnerability of their business model. Friday afternoon, my phone rang with the call I'd been expecting. "We accept your terms," the CEO said quietly. "When can we finalize the agreement?" The transfer documents were signed that evening. 7 figures deposited into my account by Monday morning. But I still had one final card to play. The wire transfer hit my account on Monday morning, $1.3 million in licensing fees, damages, and future royalty guarantees. Emma stared at the bank statement in disbelief. Our debt disappeared instantly. Our mortgage became manageable. Our children's college funds went from empty to substantial. "It's really over?" she asked, tears in her eyes. "The financial part is over," I replied. "But I'm not done yet." While Dataflow was scrambling to restore their operations with newly licensed access to my technology, I was fielding calls from their biggest competitor, TechEdge Solutions. Their offer was stunning: Senior Director of AI Development, double the salary Dataflow had originally paid me, equity stake in the company, and a signing bonus that reflected their eagerness to acquire both my skills and my technology. "We've been watching your work for months," their CEO explained during our interview. "What happened with Dataflow convinced us we need someone with your innovative capabilities and business acumen." The irony was perfect. Dataflow's mistreatment had created exactly the situation they'd been trying to prevent, their most valuable contractor joining their biggest competitor. I accepted TechEdge's offer immediately. My first assignment: lead a team to win the massive contract that Dataflow had been pursuing for 8 months, their largest potential client, worth $50 million in revenue over 3 years. The same contract they'd been developing using my AI framework before I revoked their access. Now I would compete against them with superior technology and intimate knowledge of their weaknesses. The contract competition was scheduled for 6 weeks after I joined TechEdge. Both companies would present their data processing solutions to Alpine Healthcare, a medical network that needed advanced analytics for patient care optimization. Dataflow had been developing their proposal for months, but they'd lost crucial time recovering from my license revocation. Their presentation would be built on hastily reconstructed systems that couldn't match the performance they'd previously achieved. TechEdge's proposal showcased the full power of my AI framework, optimized specifically for healthcare applications. We could offer processing speeds 3 times faster than standard industry solutions, with accuracy rates that exceeded regulatory requirements. During the presentation, I sat across the conference table from Vincent Hayes, the same executive who'd overseen my termination at Blackstone Technologies years earlier. He'd moved to Dataflow 6 months ago and was leading their proposal team. The recognition in his eyes was immediate and uncomfortable. "Chris Willock," he said after the presentations ended. "I didn't realize you'd joined TechEdge." "Recent development," I replied with a professional smile. Alpine Healthcare's decision was unanimous. TechEdge won the contract, beating Dataflow's proposal by margins that weren't even close. $50 million in revenue over 3 years, with expansion options that could double the total value. The contract that Dataflow desperately needed to stabilize their business went to their competitor, led by the person they dismissed as replaceable. Vincent Hayes looked sick as the decision was announced. Industry news outlets picked up the story within days. TechEdge secures major healthcare contract, beating established competitors. The trade publications focused on the technical superiority of our solution and the innovative approaches that had impressed Alpine Healthcare's evaluation team. What they didn't report was the behind-the-scenes drama that had led to this outcome. But everyone in our industry understood the implications. Dataflow had lost their biggest competitive opportunity to the engineer they'd mistreated, who'd taken his revolutionary technology to their primary rival. The contract win established TechEdge as the dominant player in healthcare data analytics and positioned us for expansion into other medical markets. My stock options, which had seemed generous when I joined, were now worth substantial money as our company's valuation soared. Dataflow's stock price continued declining as investors recognized they'd lost critical technology and market opportunities. Their earnings call that quarter was painful to listen to. The CEO stumbled through explanations of temporary technical challenges and strategic realignments without mentioning the real cause of their problems. Meanwhile, industry publications started featuring articles about innovative AI applications in healthcare, with my name prominently mentioned as the lead developer behind breakthrough technologies. The same technology Dataflow had once taken for granted was now driving their competitors' success and their own decline. But the final nail in their coffin was still coming. The investigation started when Dataflow's clients began filing complaints about breach of contract. Without my AI framework, they couldn't deliver the performance standards they'd promised in their service agreements. Penalty clauses triggered automatically when processing speeds fell below guaranteed minimums. Quality metrics that had been consistently met suddenly became unattainable. One client's forensic audit revealed that Dataflow's competitive advantage had disappeared overnight, exactly coinciding with my departure from the company. Industry investigators started asking uncomfortable questions about the foundation of Dataflow's technological capabilities. The trail led inevitably back to my intellectual property and the licensing agreement that Dataflow's management had ignored until it was too late. Tech blogs published exposés about companies that built their business models on technology they didn't own, warning investors to scrutinize intellectual property claims more carefully. Dataflow Solutions, a case study in intellectual property mismanagement, became required reading in several business schools. My name was prominent throughout these articles. Not as the villain who'd sabotaged a successful company, but as the innovative engineer who protected his intellectual property rights against corporate exploitation. The narrative was clear: a talented developer had created valuable technology, licensed it fairly to an employer, then revoked access when that employer violated the relationship through mistreatment and disrespect. Justice wasn't just served, it was delivered with perfect timing and maximum impact. The Tech Innovation Conference that year featured a keynote presentation slot that would define my reputation in the industry. Standing on stage in front of 800 technology leaders, I presented AI framework development, ownership, licensing, and competitive advantage. The presentation showcased my framework's capabilities while discussing the legal and business implications of intellectual property protection in the modern tech industry. In the third row, I spotted familiar faces. Dataflow executives who'd attended hoping to understand how their primary competitor had achieved such rapid market dominance. Vincent Hayes sat uncomfortably as I discussed the importance of respecting innovators and protecting the relationships that drive technological advancement. The CEO who'd negotiated my licensing settlement looked pale as I explained how proper intellectual property management could prevent catastrophic business disruptions. During the Q&A session, a young developer asked about protecting personal projects while working for larger companies. Document everything, I advised. Understand your rights. Never assume that loyalty will protect you from corporate politics. And always maintain ownership of the innovations you create independently. The applause was sustained and enthusiastic. After my presentation, I was approached by dozens of engineers, entrepreneurs, and executives who wanted to discuss collaboration opportunities. But the moment that mattered most came when I caught the Dataflow CEO's eye as I left the stage. I smiled and nodded politely, the professional courtesy you'd show any industry colleague. His expression was a mixture of respect, regret, and resignation. Today, I sit in my corner office at TechEdge Solutions, watching my team develop the next generation of AI-powered healthcare analytics. My doctorate in artificial intelligence is complete, funded by the licensing fees I earn from protecting my intellectual property. Our kids attend excellent schools, Emma has returned to her career by choice rather than necessity, and our financial future is secure through equity stakes in a company that values innovation over politics. The Alpine healthcare contract led to 5 additional major clients, each drawn by the superior performance of AI frameworks they didn't realize I developed independently years ago. Dataflow eventually recovered, but they never regained the market position they'd held when my technology gave them a competitive edge. They learned expensive lessons about the difference between employing talent and owning innovation. My story became a cautionary tale taught in business schools and discussed in boardrooms, how mistreating the people who drive your success can destroy your entire competitive advantage. But more importantly, it became an inspiration for engineers and developers who needed to see that protecting your work and demanding respect isn't just possible, it's profitable. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt undervalued or disposable in your career, drop a comment below about your own experiences with workplace justice. Hit that like button if you believe hard work should be rewarded, not exploited. And subscribe for more stories where the underdogs don't just win, they completely rewrite the rules of the game. They thought they'd fired me for good. But I took the one thing they could never get back.